AI gets stuff wrong sometimes.
Does it, Perry? Is that true?
It does. Yeah, I mean, I don't feel like we're breaking news here when we talk about that.
A hell of an intro.
In a lot of the last segment, we talked about the fact that when these things roll out, initially they're less than stellar in their accuracy and usefulness, but you can look at it and you can see potential, and that potential breeds hope, and that hope breeds like people actually investing time and starting to use them. And as people invest time and start to use them, they start to become a little bit complacent with the way that they check for things. And that starts to bring the danger in, I think. So I think it's that snowball, right? Is the you start it, you know there's something exciting and new. You approach it with a little bit of skepticism. You see it work well enough times that you start to become complacent, and then you get bit, and then you get embarrassed. And that's the way it works.
Luckily, I don't do any work that is extremely high stakes, but even in the things I do, I try and remember I'm only going to really trust this thing for low stakes stuff, because it is easy to get complacent. Even in like low stakes coding projects, I'll find myself being kind of mindless and a little over trusting. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and I think we're all probably familiar with like the hype cycle model. Are you familiar with the Gartner hype cycle, where you have that trigger point, and then actually, I'll pull up a graphic of that.
Yeah. Okay. I feel like you included something about this in the book, or something that maybe I'm confusing for that in the book.
I've probably mentioned it on here before, but I'll just pull up a blank image of it.
I mean, wasn't it you who said there's literally the expression like you can take the analyst out of Gartner, but you can't take the Gartner out of the analyst?
Probably
or something like that.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Let me share this screen real quick.
All right.
Back in my Gartner days, we would talk about this a lot. So with any kind of technology or technology category, you start with this innovation trigger. And so like with large language models, that would be, the attention is all you need paper, and or the release of ChatGPT, whatever you want to figure out, is like, what's the thing that starts to generate excitement? And then you get people using it, you get a bunch of news reports on it, you get a bunch of vendors spinning up around it, and then that brings you to this, what we'd call this peak of inflated expectations, where it is going to solve world hunger. It's going to be the best thing since sliced bread. It's going to make everybody get along, and decrease polarization and all that kind of stuff. And then you realize that actually it doesn't do much of that stuff very well. The technology tends to overpromise and underdeliver, or the way that the vendors talk about it, they consistently overpromise and underdeliver. People embarrass themselves. They spend too much money on it. And then so you end up in this trough of disillusionment, which is, I think, a really good phrase. Like that sticks with you.
Yeah, I love the labels on this graph. They're phenomenal.
Yeah. And like, many of the embarrassing things that we've seen are that, right? AI overviews with encouraging rocks on pizza or glue on pizza, and for you to eat a certain number of rocks a day. You're like, oh man, this stuff absolutely sucks. And then you start to realize, actually, we can start to account for hallucinations. We understand what's going on. We understand the fact that we don't need to trust these. So instead of just kind of blindly trusting a non-deterministic system, we can start to add some checks and balances. We can put some scaffolding. We can add some other processes around it that are doing additional validation, whether that's technology-based processes or human-based checking. We can do all that, and then you can start to get into this, what they would call slope of enlightenment, but you're kind of increasing your ability to use that thing well in a productive way. And then you get to the plateau of productivity, where it's actually useful, it's predictable, it's semi-transparent in the way that it's doing it. And then that's also where costs start to come down and become under control as well. So I think that's a good model for thinking through almost any kind of technology innovation.
The curve very much looks like an elastic curve, where you swing all the way up, all the way down, and you end up settling somewhere in the middle of that. And that middle is that plateau.
Bridging that for our listeners rather than viewers.
I really like this. This holds true for a lot of things. Although I think what's interesting in our information era now is that these can happen so fast, and so like different people are very much at different places on this graph. when it comes to something like AI.
Let me do this then.
Oh boy.
I'll go back a step and I'll show you what this looks like. Maybe I can actually find it real quick. Past the Cloudflare verification.
Are you a human?
I'm a human. Or I'm an AI-driven browser. All right. I'll share this even though a lot of it's blurred out. So this is a piece of copyrighted material, so a lot of it's blurred out for the viewers. But you can see the way that this happens is that there's different categories of technology or different products that can be put on these. And so here, as it's coming down into the trough of disillusionment in 2025, Gartner's labeled foundation models, synthetic data, edge AI, and generative AI. They're a little bit pedantic in the way that they break these areas up as well. I don't know that I fully agree with like the categorizations of how they do that. But this is just to be illustrative of the fact that when you talk about AI, you could be talking about generative AI from an LLM perspective. You could be talking about image generation and something like what's the image generation model? Diffusion. Yeah. So you could be talking like large language models. You could be talking about diffusion models for images. You could be talking about like voice synthesis. You could be talking about video models. All those types of things are separate, discrete things that are trackable. And then even within those, there's separate, discrete things that could be trackable as well. So these are not like monolithic AI is on one part of this.
Yeah, because generative AI encompasses all of those things and is kind of lumped together in this. But I mean, as like a heuristic tool for trying to express the ideas of public sentiment in different sectors, as this like natural progression that we all kind of do of hype, disillusionment, and then plateauing. This is a very cool and useful graph. I feel like this is in the book, FAIK. I'm pretty sure you talk about this.
I probably mentioned it at least once. It kind of stays with me. All right, let me see if I can get this to... All right, so all that brings us to the fact that we know that AI gets it wrong a lot of times. We've talked about that, but there is a big study right now that we have to know where AI gets things wrong.
That is not an encouraging headline.
No, so the headline for those that are just listening says, largest study of its kind shows AI assistants misrepresent news content 45% of the time, regardless of language or territory. Now,
wow.
In any study, you also have to look at who is behind the study. So there's a little bit of potential self-interest in the people that ran the study, but we can look at the methodology and see if there's like good methodology there. This is an intensive international study coordinated by the European Broadcasting Union and led by the BBC.
Yeah, so broadcasters have a vested interest in saying that they represent news content better, like for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. They also have a vested interest in like when AI does summarize it, you would hope it gets it right and that it cites the right source. So all of this is there's some self-interest in this because they want their stuff to be cited correctly. They also want you to view them as the authoritative system of record for it. But when it shows up in an AI summary and they know that's going to happen, they want that they want the attribution to be right, and then they want the direct link to be right as well. They don't want context muddling to where the stat gets pulled or the quote gets pulled from BBC, but then you look at the summary and it attributes it to Axios or something like that.
Right.
Which does happen as well. So
they do have a vested interest in it working well. Yeah, you're right. There's really...
Yeah. No matter what, they want it to be the best of all worlds approach, and therefore they did a systematic study looking at it. So what they ended up finding is that, let me see if I can actually read this. 45% of all AI answers had at least one significant issue. 31% of responses showed serious sourcing problems, so missing, misleading, or incorrect attributions. That's what we were just talking about. 20% contained major accuracy issues, including hallucinated details and outdated information. Yeah, I think we've all seen that.
Yep.
Gemini performed worst.
Really?
With significant issues in 76% of responses, more than double the other assistants, largely due to poor sourcing performance.
Gemini is extremely bad at sourcing. I don't usually use AI for stuff that ends up searching the web. The things I ask it for don't typically involve that, but when they do, Gemini certainly screws it up.
Yeah.
So,
and that brings up another issue, though, right? Because most of us still use Google as our default search engine, and the AI overview is Gemini.
Yep.
So we have to be super, super skeptical where we are here in 2025, at least, on the things that are popping up in that. You can't just take it as gospel truth.
And I know last segment I had said that like I feel like Google's sort of the dependable tractor and like they're going to sort of win out in the long haul. I think it's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
I think it's crazy that they're like so bad with specifically the search and the sourcing with their AI when it's like relatively good at most other stuff.
It has to be context flooding issues, right? Is that they're pulling so much in that the attention is kind of getting lost on which thing it's sourcing and how to tie that in.
I feel like that's got to be it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then it says comparison between the BBC's results earlier this year and this study shows some improvements. So that's good, but still high levels of error. So, I think that this is really, really important research. We don't have time to go into it a lot, but they do give this News Integrity and AI Assistance Report. So that's a PDF you can check out. And then also a toolkit. So I'll go ahead and share these so you can view them real quick. And this is, for those that are watching, the News Integrity and AI Assistance, an international PSM study. And it shows the just all the different questions that they were asked, the context that was given, looking at issues like opinion versus fact, how they handled sourcing. And then they're very transparent about their methodology as well. So what questions were being asked, what assistants were being used, what response generation was, how the journalists reviewed them, and then data quality and assurance. And I'll poke into the AI assistance one real quick. What you can see is that they use ChatGPT 4.0 as the default. They use Copilot, which didn't really give them any other options as far as which model. They use Gemini 2.5 Flash, and then Perplexity, the free version of it that didn't let you pick any other model. So it's using Perplexity's internal model.
I mean, it makes sense they would use the free versions of everything because like that's what the average person's going to be doing, you know?
Exactly.
The average person who would stand to be the most harmed by incorrect information or things like that.
Exactly. Yeah. They want to know like what's the normal person going to get.
Yeah.
And then they also offer this toolkit for ways to think about it. And it is super, super detailed about thinking about hallucinations, lack of fidelity to source material, out of date information and context, all of that kind of stuff that will affect accuracy. So I thought they put a really good amount of thought into this.
I thought this was I like this a lot, that they've put together a toolkit because it seems to be like it's geared towards also other people in like the news industry of like, rather than like what is going on, like what lens do I use to look at these things? And I always like those kinds of resources.
Yeah. And I think for a general person too, so even if you're not into news and fact checking and journalism on your own, to look at it and kind of scan through and say, oh, these are the kind of issues that keep popping up. And these are the categories of issues so that when I evaluate AI generated content now, I can think through that lens.
And for those of you not looking, it's very, very well organized and seems very easy to navigate with nice table of contents and stuff. So definitely a PDF to poke through.
Definitely a PDF to poke through. Now, I'm just going to show one more thing before we finish out because I know we're over time for this segment. But this, again, shows one more problem with AI right now is we're kind of in this peak of inflated expectations and we're dropping into the trough of disillusionment area and hopefully finding our way into the plateau of productivity. But this is the state of AI and security and development. And they looked at 450 security leaders, so chief information security officers or the equivalent, developers, and application security engineers. And what they found is that 1 in 5 organizations or respondents suffered a serious incident linked to AI-generated code.
Not surprised. I've heard similar things from friends working in coding fields.
Yeah, and I mean, we've talked about that vibe coding can be fun. And then also just some of the efficiencies that you get, even if you're a hardcore developer and you're using Copilot or some of the, like Claude Code or something like that to help, you can kind of get addicted to how fast it generates code. But you got to go back and make sure that that code is as solid or hopefully more solid than something you would generate yourself. So use that time efficiency, a sliver of that, at least to go back and check.
Yeah. And I mean, things like that compound too. So it's a whole thing. Yeah.
You don't want to get it to where it's so unmanageable because you have so much generated code that you don't really know what's in it. And that was a problem even with human generated code, is that the code would get so long and so complex that it would be really, really difficult to keep up with. And code reviews have always been a really important thing. We got to find ways to do better with that in the AI era as well. Especially
in big code bases with especially consumer facing stuff. It's important to data. Oh, yeah.
Yes, exactly. Well, that's all I got to say about AI being wrong.
Well, there's a little bit more. Well, this isn't necessarily about AI being wrong, but in our next segment, we're going to talk about AI taking jobs, because I think it's a common thing we all hear about, and it's a thing a lot of people are worried about. It's a thing that is definitely affecting people, but it's also something that is really hard to find any kind of concrete trends about. So we're going to explore the idea of AI job loss and the current state of things in our next segment. Stay right here.